Welcome, welcome to Diversify Design, Greater Boston. My name is Ken Walker, and I have the pleasure of serving as Scholas's Executive Vice President of Diversity and Operational Excellence. For more than 25 years, Scholas has been advancing economic opportunity through rigorous, tuition-free tech training and connecting our graduates to high-growth careers in technology. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is an area I'm extremely passionate about because of the impact and benefit that it brings to both companies and individuals. Simply put, DEIB, with a focus on the B today, makes good business sense. My colleague Damian Howard and I co-founded Diversify Design in 2016 to bring together committed individuals, such as yourselves, to move DEIB conversations and intent into action. Focus on action. I am thrilled that we're hosting our first Diversify Design convening of 2022 in Greater Boston. And I know I'm going to be energized by all the engagement, you guys in the chat room asking us questions. I'm going to be there, so ask away. Today's event, Mosaic, not Melting Pot, fostering true belonging in the workplace, will examine the intricacies of belonging. And after a dynamic panel discussion, be sure to transition to interactive networking. Facilitated by some of my Scholas colleagues to discuss 2022 DEIB goals, practices, and approaches for success. Let's keep the conversation going. I'll see you in the chat room. Without further ado, Robin Nadeau, come up to the virtual stage and join me.
Thank you, Ken. It is great to be here and holding this space with all of you this afternoon. My name is Robin Nadeau, and I'm the Managing Director here at Scholas Greater Boston. I am so excited to be here hosting our first Diversify Design event locally in Greater Boston. Our goal today is to explore the intricacies of belonging and ways in which we can foster a culture of inclusion. Often lately, I don't know about you, but I've been part of a lot of panels and a lot of conversations over the past 2 years that focused on diversity and focused on diversity with regards to talent acquisition and forming really diverse teams. That is extremely important. However, we also know, and we know here today, that inclusion and belonging is just as important. With the Great Resignation, we have seen people leaving for various reasons. And Massachusetts is not an exception to that rule. We recognize that inclusion and belonging is essential to keeping our workforce, retaining our workforce, ensuring productivity, and making systemic change. Now is the time, and many companies right now are exploring and testing and piloting new ways and new practices of keeping their workforce specifically around inclusion and belonging. And that's why we were very, very intentional in making this the focus of our conversation with you today. I'm very excited because our panel is a powerhouse lineup of people with expertise in this area. And I'd like to introduce them quickly before we get started. First today is our moderator, Ladi Olaoye, and he's a diversity and inclusion consultant with Diversity at Workplace Consulting Group. Ladi is a longtime leader in this space, particularly with the National Society of Black Engineers, which is an organization really focused on increasing diversity in STEM careers. So glad to have you, Ladi, and thank you for leading the panel today. Next, we have Enna Jimenez, who's an accomplished technologist of over 30 years in this field, who brings a lot of QA expertise to her role in the tech sector. Throughout her career, Enna has often been the only woman, and as she will tell you, the only Black and Latina woman in the room around the table. And it's through her experiences that she now has this sustained passion that carries her along with regards to mentoring others in the field and around inclusion and belonging as well. We also have Guy Pacitti joining us from Pegasystems. Guy is the global leader of inclusion and diversity for Pega. He is a passionate leader in this field around diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging, and particularly around unconscious bias, and really strives to really remove the bias and the blind spots around bias. And you'll hear more from him today around this and what he's doing. And last but not least, and you know it's not least because I know Jean very well, Jean's rounding out our panel, and Jean is coming to us today as the CIO of EverQuote. And Jean knows just how powerful belonging is when you don't have it, and when you do have it, and when you do experience this. And throughout his career, he sought to really create that environment of belonging wherever he's been, most recently as a leader at EverQuote. So I'm really pleased to have you all join us today. Thank you. I'm looking forward to your perspectives. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ladi to begin the panel.
Welcome, everyone. I know everyone is excited to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. But before we start with the panel discussion, let's talk about the title of today's event. So, Mosaic, Not Melting Pot. Fostering through belonging in the workplace. So for so long, the prevailing picture of a successful diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging program, DEIB, as some of you might know it, has been one of a melting pot. So the thought has always been, oh, let's bring everyone together and make everyone look the same. Just think about you're making cake. You just kind of mix everything in and have it be one color, right? But as we've seen, the tides have turned pretty much into today's world. Everyone is unique. We need to celebrate all of our differences, which comes Mosaic. Mosaic is about having all of the differences celebrated into a beautiful collage. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So in this ever-changing world and our need to embrace a more inclusive, a more effective workplace that is including everyone and people's differences, there is a shift from the melting pot to Mosaic. Now, I'm going to invite Enna as our first panelist to talk about how she's seeing this shift from melting pot to Mosaic impact strategies and outcomes as we build more inclusive spaces. So Enna.
Thank you, Ladi. And thank you, Scholas, for inviting us to be here today. Excited for this conversation. It's definitely something I'm very passionate about, and excellent first question to start with, Ladi. When I think of, 30 years ago when I first started in the technology space, right? I think about who was in that room and how were we recognized and how were people addressing us, right? And it was almost like we were invisible, right? First of all, there wasn't a lot of women in the room. And so that was certainly the starting point. And then you kind of shift and you see more women in the room. And now companies need to reckon with that, and they needed to be able to embrace the fact that we had our voices and our thoughts and opinions and that we needed to be heard, right? I assimilate a lot of this with sort of my wardrobe and how it's changed throughout the years, because I think it tells the story of how I was embraced as a person as we made, kind of shifted through here. I vividly remember early on in my years of financial services that all my entire closet was, grays and black and brown, right? The kind of your traditional, the blues, right? Very traditional colors. You were very, how you wore your hair, whether you wore the big hoops. I mean, this was all the things we had to think about when we walked into any organization that we went to. And now today, companies have embraced us and they're doing a better job, right? I can't say every company has done this, but we're making great strides that they're embracing and allowing we're able to bring our full authentic self into the workforce. I mean, who would have thought that someone can go in with, you know, their various textures and hairstyles, right? And be accepted for that and not be looked as in a negative way because of what you look like. I think organizations are definitely understanding that there are more angles to us, and they're trying to still figure out ways of embracing that and making sure that we're at the table. Those organizations that are connected, Ladi, with, you know, the National Society of Black Engineers, Alpha, right? All of these organizations, affinity groups, we've got this long list of corporate sponsors that we know they get it. They get it, right? They understand that in order for them to embrace the people that they want to hire, it's not just about having them walk through that door and be like, oh my God, great, we've hired all these folks, but it's about what they do to make sure that they feel connected and that they feel like they are, they're part of their bottom line and they're part of creating that bigger whole for what they, you know, their vision of what they want to do, right? And so what I've seen is that organizations are just being much more intentional about who is in their recruiting team, how diverse those teams are, the vendors that they're partnering with. That's also another big step. It's something that I encourage a lot of people to ask their vendors. How diverse is your candidate pool? And honestly, I have turned vendors away, suppliers, right, who are looking to work with me. And I get lots of emails on LinkedIn. They're like, oh my God, we can supply you with candidates. Well, how diverse is your supplier pool? Oh, not diverse, then I can't work with you. Go work on making your population much more like me, and then we can talk, right? And it's up to us to be able to make those decisions and those requests so that we can continue to expand that through many more organizations. So having this opportunity to be able to reach out and talk to many folks, to be able to make sure that everyone understands that they play a role in how the future is going to continue to shift, to me is super important. So I'll kind of pause there.
Yes, thanks a lot for that. And I think one key thing you mentioned, though, is supplier diversity. A lot of folks just think about, let's just employ people in here and forget about what our client base looks like, what the folks that are supplying us candidates looks like, the different materials and equipments we have in the office. It's key to pay attention to supplier diversity. So Enna talked about companies that get it earlier. Jane, I'm going to bring you up to the microphone to talk about your perspectives in relation to this question.
Great, thanks, Ladi, and thanks, Enna. It was actually really nice to hear your story also. You know, my background, at least personally, is that I'm the child of two immigrants. I was, maybe there are some people that may relate. I was often the only minority in the room, in the class, like for years and years and years. You know, it was, you know, coming from that background, it's already hard to feel like you belong. You know, everybody's sort of looking at you, certainly because like I look different. So we start with that. But then, like, I think, you know, just getting back to the topic of sort of like the mosaic and not the melting pot, I think the mosaic for me, you know, is the fact that businesses need performance. Okay, so it's, you know, we can't forget about that. Like businesses have to perform, but in order to perform, we need different perspectives. And so, like, it's very, very natural that we want people who think differently in order to be able to get to, you know, be able to look at different situations and to be able to come up with different ways to solve different problems. Solving the same problem in exactly the same way is likely to provide the same outcomes every single time. It's not really a great way to grow. So, you know, if you take the fact that we do need to have diversity in our workforce to be able to perform, then, you know, it's really a meritocracy. Okay, like you want people who can perform from different backgrounds, right? So if you ground yourself in that particular idea, then you say, okay, well, what, you know, like, fine, we're going to go look for people from different backgrounds. Like that's important, that's necessary, but that's not sufficient. The next step is, all right, you get all these people who actually do become interested in your organization. how do you get them to stay? How do you get them to like feel like they're going to be successful in this place? I mean, there are just some very, very basic things. Are there people around you that look like you? Are there people who are like you that have succeeded in your organization? And like if you start from that, if you look across your organization, other organizations, you're going to see like successes and you're going to see failures. But bringing it now to something that's more practical, at EverQuote, like one of the things that we did a few years ago was we decided to invest in employee resource groups, ERGs. And with ERGs, what we were able to do is we were able to create sort of different types of communities based on the fact that we could celebrate the differences in our workforce. Like just some examples of our ERGs include a group called Ever Black, which is for our for our group who are people from both African American and just sort of like color backgrounds. There are definitely issues associated with having a background in that area. There's also the one that I sponsor is called Ever Nation, which is a international multicultural organization. We have another organization called Ever Queer, and also a group called the Women's Forum. So what we tried to do is we tried to create environments in which we could create like ally sponsors and mentors, and have a team of folks within those groups who could advocate for the needs of the people who are around. And so we've done all of those things, but in the end, like the reason why we do it is because we know that the diversity in our organization is what actually makes us strong. It is what actually gives us the ability to solve problems in ways that like other people have not been able to solve. And I think like we fully embrace this, and hopefully after this pandemic ends, we'll have more and more ways that we can engage.
Talking about Mosaic, Jean, you mentioned businesses must perform, and in order to perform, we need different people coming together. And this different people coming together, we have to ensure, one, they do feel like they belong in the workplace, but also how do we make sure they stay? Which takes me to my next question. So according to a Harvard Business Review on the value of belonging at work, high belonging was linked to 50% increase in job performance and a 50% drop in turnover risk. So my next question is for you, Guy. Given your background, what is the relationship between belonging and workforce retention in your experience?
Yeah, well, first, let me thank Scholas for inviting me to this discussion today. I'm really excited and honored to be with our other panelists. I loved the title of Mosaic, Not Melting Pot, because I have always thought in the work that I'm doing in DE&I, my North Star is focused on us as human beings. We have a need for a collective sense of belonging, and at the same time, a balance to be appreciated for the attributes that we bring to the table that are unique. So when it comes to retention, and we are in the middle of the Great Resignation, we've all heard of that. We've probably all seen the statistics on the news and the papers. This is accentuated. This gets exaggerated, accelerated in a time when we are seeing more and more job openings, and in particular for diverse populations, especially in the United States, where we have racial and ethnic diversity. We see greater levels of attrition in companies. Actually, the 50% that Ladi, you just mentioned, brings to mind, there was a tech leavers study that was done by the Kapoor Foundation a few years ago, and they indicated that of the people that they surveyed who decided to leave a company, 57% of them said that they would not leave a company had the company created a more inclusive work environment. And when they cut that data by people who identify as being in a diverse population, the number went up. It was 64%. So the argument and the business justification for creating an inclusive work environment is now stronger, more critical than ever before. And I believe, in my opinion, in my experience, that it is incumbent upon people managers and business leaders to create that environment that makes people feel like they belong, makes people feel like they are valued for the individual that they are. And they do that through trust. And there's three components of trust. One is empathy, how empathetic you appear to your employee base. One is authenticity. Are you really authentic in the workplace? And do people feel that? And then the third piece of trust, the third part of that triangle, is around the rigor of your logic. Can people get behind you and the ideas that you bring to the table based upon your logic? And that not only is related to the quality of your logic, but also how capable you are to communicate that logic to your teams. So I think at the end of the day, how do we influence retention, especially during the Great Resignation? We do that through our leadership team, our people managers, and hold them accountable for creating that culture that makes people feel included.
And I just wanted to quickly highlight something you talked about. So there's the trust element, so empathy, authenticity, and can your logic be communicated effectively to your teams? Right, I love that. So I'll invite you, Enna, anything to add to this?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we talk about this so much, right? And everyone here can probably go out and find lots of articles, but I often get the question of, okay, but great, we get it, theory, yes, it makes sense, but what can we do? How do we actually implement this? And so I want to kind of talk a little bit and make sure we gave the audience a little bit of tidbits from that side, right? I look at it this way. We all attend tons of meetings. You can all look around and see who's in your meeting. You all know who's participating and who's not participating in that meeting, whose voice is being suppressed, whose voice is being, squished or passed over, right? So our duty, our job here is really to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. That's critical. That is number one in every single person. Every one of us on this call are able to make huge strides on that, right? Which is when you see, whether it's a fellow woman or a fellow person of color that you're not hearing them, that they're not, able to share their thoughts or experiences, and make space, right? I invite everyone to make sure that in your rooms, in that table, in that meeting, that you make space for everyone to be able to share their own thoughts, because someone's thoughts and opinion about, whatever they've experienced is going to provide a different perspective that is usually missing in all of these decisions that are being done. So that to me is sort of advice number one here, which is make sure that you are looking around and embracing and helping people to have a voice. I also talk about the fact that as managers, and Guy, as you kind of, took it right there, right? Which is, as managers, it's our duty to make sure that our teams feel included, right? That's what we need to do. I've been managing now for a gazillion number of years. And something that I'm very proud of is being able to have huge engagement and morale in my teams. And that's because I reach out to everyone, I connect with them. There are folks that don't like to be called out in the meeting. There are folks that rather that you spend 5, 10, 15 minutes outside of a meeting preparing or just brainstorming so that they know what they can bring into a call. And as a manager, I need to know how I can do that and who I need to work with so that I can make sure that when people come to a group meeting, they are their best self. Right. And tied to that is making sure that we create opportunities for our senior leaders to see our staff in these great moments. So that's our job, to make sure that we create that pathway so that they can succeed. I think about all the opportunities that I had growing up in my career, right? I had amazing sponsors, amazing mentors. And a lot of that wasn't because I said, "Ooh, can you be a sponsor of mine?" Or, it was just really because I didn't know, and I would ask questions. I often get told, and it was easy for you because you're such a people's person. I'm like, well, true, but anyone can do that, right? Anyone that reaches out to me and says, Enna, can I have 5 minutes with you? I will always say yes. It may take us a little bit to get together, but I'm going to make the time for you, right? And I say that because I think it's important for every single person to also step outside of their comfort zone. We need to take control of our own careers. We can't just sit back and expect our managers to create all of these opportunities for us, right? So we need to be able to kind of lift our head up and say, hey, I'm in this department. I know the folks in my group, but I have no idea what the rest of the company does. I don't know what this business does. I only know my business line. And even within my business lines, I only know my particular project, right? And that's a miss that we each have. And so my feedback here would be to also, urge all of you to, lift your head up, look across the company, figure out how you're going to be able to help all the different departments and kind of reach their own goals. Every employee plays a key role. And it's about managers and employees understanding that so that we can work together to not only make, our companies achieve their goals, right? But also so that we can fulfill our own. And we can't just sit back and wait for someone else to say, hey, I'm going to pull you in for this. You also got to express what you want. Trust me, I would not have gotten all my promotions. I would not have gotten all of the opportunities had I not spoken up and said, I want to do that. I don't know how, when, where, right? I want to do that. You know what I mean? My next goal is to get on a corporate board. And I tell this to everybody. You know why? Because the more I tell it to people, the more it'll just manifest and it'll happen. So everybody needs to do that within your own little space. And this is what's ultimately going to help all of us. I get super passionate about this, if you can't tell.
Yes, I was just about to say that. And I'm here supposed to be moderating, but I'm taking notes. So if you see my laptop shaking, that's me just making sure I'm grabbing these things. But really quickly, Enna, you said, you dropped gems. So I got to just repeat some of them. So just in case the folks that just joined late missed them. But you talked about look around you. Who is not in the room? Key. That's a big one. Also, you talked about our job is to make sure everyone's voice is heard. Yes, and yes. A message for managers that are listening today. So if you're a manager, you have staff that report to you, be a conduit for your employees' success. As Enna said, go the extra mile and make yourselves available. Because if we want to talk about belonging, you have to make sure you're available to your employees, because you don't want to start thinking about, wait, why is everyone leaving? Because you weren't available, you didn't see this, you had an opportunity to get to know your employees. And then finally, for everyone in the on this that is here virtually with us today, take control and responsibility of your own careers. Woo, excellent words from Enna and Guy. All right, we're gonna move on to the next question. As you've heard from our panelists, belonging is essential for retaining diverse talent. But how do you do that? I've looked in the chat, a lot of folks are asking, so what do we do? What metrics should we be looking at? I'm going to pose this next question to Jean. So Jean, what strategies have been successful? And particularly now, as we're still facing a global pandemic, I want this thing to be over. So we can have events like this in person, but when we talk about retention strategies and what's been successful to increase belonging and also in return, workplace retention. So can you answer that?
Sure, and I think there's probably an answer that I want to give that would have been pre-pandemic. There's sort of hopefully what we would call now maybe tail end of pandemic and maybe post-pandemic. But let's start with pre-pandemic. Like what were the strategies that we had used, before the pandemic? I'll just use a very concrete example. Within EverNation, what we like to do is we like to celebrate the Lunar New Year, right? So like some people will call it Chinese New Year, but we call it Lunar New Year because it's actually that there are more cultures than just the China that celebrate it. And so in that particular event, we got 70, 80 people. We would order a whole bunch of food, get into a room. People would be able to share stories about how they would celebrate the Lunar New Year, at least when they were growing up. We had some content around what the origins for that particular holiday were, so that people could just sort of understand, because maybe there are a lot of people who might not have grown up with that particular tradition. And so in the pre-pandemic sense, we would all get together, we get a bunch of food, we eat, we drink, we tell a lot of stories. that was very easy. And that felt very natural to like most people. And it was definitely a way that people got very excited about just being at our company and getting a chance to like mingle and get to know people, and without pretense. It was just like, it was just a way so that we could actually get to know a lot of people. Now, we're thinking about having the same event. We were just like the Lunar New Year is actually coming up like, in a week. And so, hopefully what we're calling, tail end of pandemic, the way that we're actually trying to do this is that we're trying to do a hybrid strategy for being able to have that event. So we're going to have a prescribed like 11:45 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. period where we would have either catered food, where whoever was able or comfortable coming into the office would be able to get their food, and then we would have either a larger group or smaller groups, depending on how comfortable people were getting together. And then for the remote workforce to give things like Grubhub, gift cards or whatever to be able to order their own food, basically. And then once that was done, we would have we would have content. Maybe we would do some Kahoot, some quizzes about the holiday. There'd be some virtual giving out of little like red envelopes with gift money, whatever it is. Like there's a tradition there. But like all these things are things that like get people feeling like they not only belong because these are things that are their culture, but it's a way of gaining more friends, allies, sponsors, supporters, like whatever, like you use all those nouns, and getting them because you're including them in your culture. And so like we've done this over and over again at EverQuote. Like it's just sort of what we've like I think food is sort of like the lingua franca of EverQuote. We try to get people together so that we have more opportunities to be able to eat and socialize with each other. Like there's no magic to that formula. I think lots and lots of organizations have done it, but when we've done that, we've created a unique culture based on that, and it's all again based on a meritocracy. Like if you deserve to be there, it's great. Now let's figure out how we can get you all together. But we want you we want everybody from every background.
Well, thanks a lot for that, Gene. And I think just to build up on that, food brings everyone together. Let's think about it. I mean, what is the first thing you're going to do after the pandemic is finally over? Have a potluck at work, invite friends over, go to a restaurant. It's not really hard to build belonging and retention in the workplace, but don't take that to the bank now. Ladi is just giving his opinion, so I'm going to invite more of the experts.
I could probably talk about the effect that the pandemic has had on inclusion all afternoon. I think it's so interesting. I think back to a few years ago when we didn't have video technology, right? If we were in a pandemic and working remotely without video technology, we would be really jeopardizing our business productivity. However, when I think about the sense of inclusion that people experience in the workplace, it's fractured as a result of this video technology, the absence of being able to be in the same room with someone. We don't have those water cooler moments, the unplanned moments that so often lead us to feel like we've got a friend, a colleague that we can trust. We also don't get the nonverbal cues, right? If we're at a conference table, somebody can make a comment, you can see where other people are looking. So that sense of being included is really jeopardized. The last piece of this that I think is so interesting, there's research coming out of Harvard Business School, communications professor, who before the pandemic started this research around the effect that eye contact has on someone's feeling of inclusion. And as humans, we default to talking to people in a conference room and looking at those people who look like us, right? And so the theory behind this research is, if you want to make more people feel included, then intentionally make eye contact with them. We don't have that opportunity right now. Even though we're on camera in front of each other, our eyes are shifted to the screen. They're not looking directly into the camera. We're not looking at each other. We're not getting that intimacy. So I think this exaggerates the need for organizations to very intentionally create an inclusive environment. And I think it's really important for that message to come from the organization itself and from the organization's leaders. So, as an example, we have rolled out 7 employee resource groups in 14 months. We've been doing one every other month. We've gotten this really well oiled. And a key piece of this is to have executive sponsors who are C-suite sponsors who are very actively involved, who are engaging their direct reports and their leadership team in the employee resource groups so that people feel that sense of value, not only from each other, but from the company and from the leadership team.
Thanks a lot for that, Guy. And I think that's really key when we talk about retention and belonging, having executive leadership support. So Enna talked about the managerial level, but having communications, the commitment, and the very honest and pure intentions towards the EIB. So for our final question, which I want this conversation to go on and on and on, but it can't. For all of our panelists, so I'm going to ask each of you to answer this question. What practical advice would you give to people here today who want to be more intentional about cultivating an environment that fosters through belonging? So we'll start with you, Enna.
Sure. I know we're wrapping up, but for me, it's build trust, be transparent, bring people to the table, and make sure that everyone's voice is heard.
Jean?
I think for me, it's that, making sure that you have everybody who is around you, that they all feel safe in being able to express their ideas. And because of the fact that so many people have so many different ways that they want to communicate, you've got to give people all the ways that they can communicate. And that also means like they need new ways of being able to communicate things that will advocate for themselves or have other people to advocate for you. Like giving people those opportunities is, it's so important. I like doing it with food, by the way. That's just me.
Sounds good. And then finally, Guy.
Yes. So I think for any business person, it's important to do it from 2 perspectives. First, make investments that help to accelerate the career advancement of underserved populations, but it shouldn't stop there. The work needs to also include modifying the lens through which people who have accountability to make decisions, that the information that they need, so that we are looking not only at boosting up underserved populations, but we're also looking at making decisions through a different lens than we historically have.
Thank you so much, all of our panelists. And if I may add, you're unofficial 4th panelist. But I think one thing for me is the honesty around why you are engaging in DEIB. So why is retention important to you? Is it just about like, wow, like people are leaving here, or you really want to understand the why, what you're going to do about it, and how you're going to make sure people actually do belong? I think a lot of times in the workplace, employers just look at how do we keep the folks that walked in the door yesterday and forget the folks that have been there for years. What made them stay? It's always good to know, why did you stay at the company? And build upon that. What would you like to change? I think we should never forget the folks that have been at institutions, because they have valuable perspectives that someone who walked in yesterday might not have. But really glad we got this opportunity to talk about this. I'm going to invite Robin to close us out here. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ladi, and thank you, Enna, Jean, and Guy. This has been wonderful conversation. Appreciate your ideas and your perspectives. When I reflect about where at least we have representatives, by the way, from throughout the country, in addition to the greater Boston region joining us today. So thank you to everyone who's tuned in. When I think about where the 5 of us are sitting right now, though, in our homes or maybe in the office today, but all in the greater Boston region, one of the things that I think is special about greater Boston is the fact that we all recognize the need to partner and what partnership means. And one of the things that we realize is to create true change, it takes collaboration and that partnership. And in that spirit, I do want to thank our local co-sponsors. I've had conversations with all of them and am active with them in an ongoing manner to not only bring these discussions together, but figure out what the action is to move us forward. And so thank you to Sim Boston, thank you to Skillworks, and thank you to Tech Hire Boston for co-sponsoring this conversation with us today. We want to keep the momentum going here with Scholas Greater Boston's work and how we convene together and create movement around inclusion and belonging. So to that end, for all of my friends and colleagues joining today from Greater Boston, we're actually going to continue this work in a roll up your sleeves manner now. So we engaged in a lot of conversation. We're not done yet. We're going to break out and network and keep that conversation going. But after today, we'll be following up with you, because what we'd like to do is convene a small group of committed individual leaders to roll up their sleeves and begin to put some knowledge, an idea that maybe was sparked today or you had coming to this group, into action by identifying an inclusion and belonging goal. Nothing big, doesn't have to be big, it has to start somewhere. So a goal you have, an action you want to realize in your company, in your division, maybe in your team later this year. And we want to provide facilitated support to help you create that action plan. So we're going to be hosting what we're calling a mini Learn and Lead Lab, where you can do just that with some facilitated support. We'll come together as a project team, we'll learn from each other and create that community of practice. And we'll bring in some subject matter experts and some leaders, maybe some of the folks you see today, to share deeper insight. This is not something that's going to take a whole year. This is going to be quick, down and dirty, because we want to focus on action and on the practical component. I want to thank everyone who's joined us today and held this space with us. I do want to thank again our local sponsors, Sim Boston, Tech Hire Boston, and Skillworks. They've been super supporters and partners in this work, and I know they'll continue to be. I also want to thank our national supporters for all of our Diverse by Design efforts throughout the country. Pegasystems, Google, Chubb, JP Morgan Chase, Comcast, NBC Universal. They've been wonderful supporters of our work. I also want to thank two more groups. I want to thank our advisory board members that really created a lot of space in our meetings to really brainstorm what this event should look like and that it should focus on inclusion and belonging. And I'd like to thank my team and everyone who worked on this project behind the scenes, particularly Sarah and Demetria. This would not have happened without the two of you. Our work doesn't end here. There's a lot happening. There is this mini Learn and Lead Lab that we'll be making happen, but I also want to particularly talk to, for a moment, everyone here from Greater Boston. There's so much going on, as I talked about, so I'd love for you to think about what's happening with the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce and their transformational DEI certificate. The Kendall Square Association has just launched their inclusion and innovation work. The Institute for Nonprofit Practice focuses on this work. And the Tech Hire Boston community, of which we are a part of, is planning their next DEI focused symposium that will be happening in Q2. So you can find them at Tech Hire Boston on LinkedIn. And they're planning another Mass Advantage event focused for business in the fall of this year. So we're excited to work with them on that. Thank you for joining us again, and take care.